Okay, welcome back. We're going to get right into it here. As we left off in the prior episode, there's some critical steps that you all need to be aware of as you're going through this process to be successful. Let's talk about some of those critical parts here. Number one, this grounding strap that's in here, cannot leave that out. I've had it before, and I've seen it where this grounding strap that goes to this stud is missing. If you do not have it, your stern drive will not be properly grounded and you will have major issues. So definitely have that ground strap in there. Number two is we need to talk about the proper torque sequence. So for this exercise, you are going to need two different size sockets, a 5/8 and a 9/16. As we talked about in the night episode, as I call it, these guys here are going to be your 9/16. These need gasket sealing compound on them. You don't need to put thread locker on it. Just use your gasket sealing compound. And then these 5/8 bolts down here, these need washers times 4 on each one of them. And then these two down here, which border the exhaust, these do not need any kind of washers on them. So just keep that in mind. All right. So what we're going to do first and foremost is we are going to go ahead and snug all these up. You want to snug them up pretty good. Maybe put like a little grunt on each one of them. Nothing too crazy. Just enough so you've got these in a sequence, or basically you've got them in a position where we can start the torquing sequence. So you can see here I've got 2, 4, 6, 8 bolts. Technically 2 bolts and 6 nuts. So depending on your model, we're going to go over the different sequence here. So if you only have 6 bolts, which are going to be these two and then these for the transom mount, if you only have those, the very first bolt that you're going to start on is in the middle. So you've got these two, you're going to start right here. This is going to be your first bolt that you're going to torque down. And I say bolt, you know what I mean. It's going to be your nut. This nut is going to be torqued down between 20 to 25. And remember, it's in the middle. So 20 to 25. If you have 6 bolts, then you're going to go to this one right across. 2. Then you're going to go to the top nut up here. That's number 3. Then you're going to go down here to number 4. Then across to number 5. And as you can imagine, your last nut to tighten to 20 to 25 is going to be up here. That's going to be 6. That's if you have a 6 nut configuration. Let's go over that one more time. We start off in the middle. 1, 2. We go to the top. That's 3. Then we go down here, 4, across, 5, and then we stop at our 6. And these are all going to be 20 to 25 foot-pounds of torque. Whatever you do, don't just randomly tighten it down to whatever you feel like it needs to be. That's not the way to do it, and definitely don't do that. Okay, so now let's talk about if you have a total of 2, 4, 6, and 8. There's a different sequence that you're going to do if that's the case. And some of the King Cobras also are going to have the same sequence, so keep that in mind. So if you have 8 nuts and bolts that you're going to do, this is going to be the first one. Now the way you're going to know this is the first one to start off with is because this is the one with the grounding strap. So in the 8 configuration, you start off with the grounding strap. Then instead of going across, you're going to go to this one. That's going to be your number 2. Then we go to this one, number 3. Crisscross, go to 4. Then we drop down to the very bottom one. That's 5. All right. And remember, these are all 20 to 25 foot-pounds of torque. All right. So we're on number 5. This is where the torque changes. So keep that in mind. Now we're up to this very first bolt. That's going to be number 6. When you reach this one, do not, I repeat, do not tighten it 20 to 25 foot-pounds of torque. This bolt only gets tightened down between 12 to 14, right here, 12 to 14 foot-pounds of torque. All right. So once we hit number 6, then we go to number 7, which is right across. That one again, 12 to 14 foot-pounds of torque. That's number 7. Switch your torque wrench over to the nut configuration, which is going to be 20 to 25 foot-pounds of torque. And that's going to finish off your number 8 bolt right here. All right, so let's go over this again with the torque sequence and an 8 bolt configuration. We're going to start off with the one with the grounding strap. That's number 1. Then we're going to go down here to number 2, then go straight up. Number 3, we're still on the transom plate. Number 4 down here. Then we drop down to where the exhaust piece is. That's number 5. Then we go to number 6. This is our bolt. That one gets 12 to 14. Then we do the other bolt, 12 to 14. Then we finish up down here. Now, if you're not careful, you may, because you're so used to doing 12 to 14 on these two, this is a common problem, to tighten this one down also to 12 to 14. That's going to be an under rating for your torque specs, and that will cause some issues. So make sure when you finish up, change your torque rating to 20 to 25 foot-pounds for this last one. After you've gotten everything down, you may have to run through the sequence a few times to get everything properly torqued as it's supposed to be. And once you get to that point where everything is torqued down, then you should have everything as soon as you hit it with the wrench, the torque wrench. It should be perfect. All right. So I've already done that on off camera, but I wanted to go over the proper sequence with you to show you what it looks like when everything is completed. So another thing to remember here, like I said, is make sure that grounding strap is in place. Okay, let's talk about the other tip too that you're going to need to know. This is going to save you a ton of time when you go to install your motor, and trust me, you're going to thank me for this. You see these little squares? Those are actually nuts. For some reason, these like to come loose as you're tightening the bolt, the nut on top of these. And fortunately, this one down here on this side is impossible to get to typically because there's a starter over here. So, quick tip, make sure you pay attention to this. You want to take a 2-foot level and line it up. See if I can do it in a way that you can see. Anyway, you want a straight edge across this line and this line, because your motor is perfectly straight, at least as the engine mounts are. And this needs to be in line with that. And the way you can do it, it's kind of hard to see. See, like that, right? You want to make sure they're level. You're going to need, to achieve that, you're going to need a 7/8 and 3/4. All right, 3/4 goes at the bottom as backup, and the nut is held in by a 7/8. So try to hold that as steady as possible and make sure you create this line, because what will happen is if this nut is sideways, your motor, you may try to drive this nut down and your motor mounts aren't sitting properly. So your motor actually would be sitting at a really different direction. You could, in theory, tighten it down and run the motor for a few years like that. And eventually, if this ever did rattle back down, and it actually would change the engine alignment all at once. It would change it by roughly whatever that distance is, thickness wise. So roughly, I don't know, 3/8, maybe 1/8 of an inch, something like that. And that could throw off your engine mount, instantly kill your gimbal bearing in about maybe a few hundred hours. And also, in worst case, would destroy your engine coupler. So be very cognizant of this little square on each side. If you forget about that and you don't level these up, it's going to cost you a lot of time, a lot of heartache. So definitely pay attention to that. All right, so for the final suggestion, a lot of you thinking, okay, I got it all torqued down on my 6 or 8 bolt nut configuration. I Got these leveled. I'm ready to install the motor. Well, not quite yet. No, you're not. Take your level here. Make sure across these two, it's still level. Now we're going to keep the straight edge. Obviously, that part is important here and here, but we also need to make sure as far as your top of your boat and your engine mounts, you want it all level. Same thing here. If not, it's going to throw off your engine mounts up front. It'll make it look all weird. Your engine won't sit properly in the boat. So definitely do yourself a favor and make sure this in general is level. You do have enough play to take the transom plate and turn it in any given direction to make it perfectly level. So take your time as you're torquing these down. If you start noticing it's getting off a little bit, stop what you're doing and fix it, because it's kind of an important step. And also make sure these are good and tight too, in terms of the 7/8 and 3/4 combination. Make sure these are tight. I have seen it before where these loosen up in general, so that's a good suggestion for you. All right. So what do we do next before we prep to get the motor in? Obviously, there's some other things we need to do. We have to do, obviously for exhaust. So I have seen it before. People get in a hurry and they forget. We talked about it multiple times before, but they forget to make these reliefs out in their engine mounts. See like here how it's cut out, and you can see on the other side. I made the mistake myself before. So I'm telling you now, make sure before you go and call it good in terms of your prep. Oh, and there's also the other thing is sometimes you don't have enough play in here because you drove this exhaust flange all the way down to the bottom. I have seen that before too, where there's not enough space. I can run my finger all along the edge, so I know I'm good here. But anyway, take your exhaust pipe. You don't need a seal or anything. But take it, and if you want, you could draw some bolts into it. That's fine, kind of up to you. But this is just for mock-up purposes. See how we made the reliefs on both sides there, and it clears it? Kind of important. Super huge step. Like I said before, I've done the same thing before, and I ended up having to cut all my fiberglass off in that area. So we're not necessarily making that a permanent connection right now, but that is a critical tip for you all to know before you get everything installed. So we're going to call this video good. This is kind of the part 2 in terms of the transom mount. What we're going to do in the next video series is we're going to talk about permanently mounting this. We're going to talk about the seal, the part number that you're going to use there, the gasket compound, and get all that put in place. We're also going to pull the gimbal seal out, and I'm going to, before I put the motor in, I'm going to show you what it looks like from this side, because I know a lot of people have asked me what's the spacing between this seal and the gimbal housing. So we'll go over that, and then we'll pull the gimbal bearing probably on the next episode, and as well permanently attach the exhaust pipe. I'll go ahead and get this cleaned up too ahead of time in preparation for that. So I hope you liked the video. Stay tuned. We got a lot of Volvo Penta / OMC Cobra stuff coming up in these next few episodes. So if you're some of my subscribers that are more into that versus the boat rebuild aspect of it, stay tuned. Definitely keep your eye open for those, because we're going to do a lot of cool videos here to in the next few episodes. So stay tuned. Hit that like button if you thought the video was helpful. Subscribe and leave me some comments. We'll catch you on the next episode. Have a good one, everybody.